Can you believe that? Well, welcome back to this channel. We are super excited. I am Tommy Durant, television producer slash paranormal weirdo, and my co-host, the one and only, the Car Wizard, who runs an amazing channel on YouTube and has blessed me with his presence here, bringing me onto the airwaves with all of you. So here we are. And tonight, we get to talk about something I am super fascinated with, and obviously so fascinated, I've been doing it for over 20 some odd years now, and that is the basics of ghost hunting.
Ghost Hunting 101. That's definitely something I'm interested in. I'm probably going to have questions myself. I've always wanted to go on a ghost hunting expedition or spend the night maybe somewhere we're supposedly haunted and see what I can see or hear or find. But there's definitely some equipment you should have with you. There's probably some rules of engagement, kind of things you should try, things you shouldn't try, and some really good advice on somebody who's just getting started in the paranormal research field.
Yeah, there's a lot of do's and don'ts. There's a lot of what they do on TV doesn't actually work in real life, or you shouldn't do that in real life. But I just have to say, like, this channel actually started because Wizard found out I was a paranormal investigator and was like, oh, we got to go out and go on a ghost hunt together. And that was sort of the start of this. That and getting me in touch with our mutual friend, Adrian Hicks, who himself has experienced a haunting. So I think between the Adrian thing and just your curiosity, Wizard, I feel like that was the birth of this channel.
Yeah, it definitely was. I have actually had a paranormal experience myself, and I don't know necessarily, I didn't use any equipment or I didn't go looking for them. And I think I've kind of, I don't know if I remember I shared it on our channel about Satan or anything like that, but
what is it? You got to tell us now. I mean, even if it was on earlier, someone else will want to hear this.
Yeah, I'll tell you the quick synopsis of it. In my family, I had in my grandmother's house, there's supposedly always been paranormal activity, even going back to when my aunts and uncles were young. Some of it was occultic type things going on, I think. So there's always been this idea things are going on. Anyways, I was probably 20, 19, something like that, stayed at the house. I was in this bedroom, and in the bedroom was a large mirror on top of a dresser. I fell asleep just fine, everything was fine, but in my dream, the mirror went black, and then I could see into hell. And I could see things come like a face come up to the screen, or up to the mirror, I should say, and then it would go away. And it was really creeping me out. And I woke up and my heart was racing, and the room was ice cold. Being a religious person, a Christian I am, I put the blankets over my head and I said prayers and prayed to the Lord and all these different things. Immediately, it got warm in the room. And I just kept my head under the blankets. I stayed asleep. I was like, I don't know what that was. I don't want to know what that was. And I talked to family members afterwards that possibly in the past, a portal had been opened in that house and it was never fully closed.
Yeah. I mean, mirrors are a key tool in some practices and rituals to allow you to see into the other realm. So maybe somebody made a door and they just never shut the door, which happens a lot, actually. Some of the worst cases I've had to deal with were people starting things that they didn't finish completely, and it allowed things to kind of run amok. So I think that's an important thing to talk about when, we're talking about this. But ultimately, that experience, very creepy, Wizard. Very creepy.
It is very creepy. It still gives me chills today. The things that I saw in the mirror was really crazy. So you want to get into paranormal investigating. So I'm going to start with the question, Tommy. Maybe a week from now, 2 or 3 weeks from now, you've got a chance that you got a place that you can scope out, spend the night there, do some investigating. What are some key tools or some basic things you should bring along? Kind of a basics 101 thing to start doing some investigations.
Well, great question. And I want to preface it with not avoiding your question like a politician. I'm just saying, preface it with this. I think for beginners, it's important to not do residential homes. So residential homes are homes that people have a haunting going on and they're asking for help. If you're not very versed or you haven't done numbers of cases and you don't know how to conduct yourself if something truly terrifying happens, the last thing you want to do is go into a place that scares the homeowners and then you leave because you're too scared. And in fact, like, I can't tell you how many clients I've had that have said that, like, oh, the other team said we had demons, got scared and ran out, when it's like not even a demonic haunting. It just was a really angry person person hunting. So I would just say like avoid the residentials because there's a lot of responsibilities that come with that. There's also a lot of legal liabilities that you have to be aware of. So if you're just going to start out, find public locations or find like historical buildings that are known to be haunted or believed to be haunted and start there. That's a great starting point. So tools you need depends on the type of investigation you're doing. If you are somebody who's very scientific, like the people I worked with at MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, like their aims are very scientific, very fact-based. What I would say is the first thing you want to do is you want to have the ability to use a portable weather station that you can get temperature, barometric pressure, and humidity readings in every room. Catalog that before you even start actually investigating as your baseline.
Mm-hmm.
And then find a room that has a lot of activity and set that weather station in that room so you can monitor it at all times. A lot of these now you can hook up to your computer and they'll automatically read everything out for you and keep track of it. So that's pretty cool. One of the first teams I worked with, Cape and Islands Paranormal Research Society, I don't believe they're around anymore, on Cape Cod, like that was one of the first things we started doing is we do baseline of that. We would also take an EMF detector, like a tri-field meter, and we would get EMF readings throughout the room, put that on a map that we would build on grid paper. Yeah, it's very laborious, by the way. Everyone thinks it's like fun. You just go in, listen for ghosts and scream. But if you're doing this for real, like there's a lot of data points you have to collect before you even sit down to start investigating. So it's like a 6 to 8 hour process every night you go do this.
Wow.
So you grab your readings on the temperature and all of the weather stuff. Then you go through, you grab EMF, base EMF throughout the whole house, which will tell you, hey, if the EMF is really high in this part of the room, well, was there activity happening near there? Was there people feeling like they're being watched or a feeling of uneasiness or feeling dizzy? Because the EMF could actually be causing that. So you look at those factors first. Then you look at like their household appliances, the things that they say turned on without anybody turning them on. Is there a possibility that those things could be triggered in ways that the owner may not have thought? So those are things we look at, as well as pests. Like we look for signs of rodents, we look for signs of raccoons, or squirrels in the attic is a big one where people are like, I hear scratching above my head at night. Well, yeah, you got raccoons or squirrels living up in your attic. Like you're gonna hear scratching up there and weird noises because the animals are there. So look for those signs. Like we do all these baselines just to get a starting point so that we know if we have baseline there and fairly steady baseline throughout the time we're trying to experience something there. When something happens that's anomalous and we see changes in several of those factors, well, now we have data. Now we have real, like, okay, barometric pressure dropped all of a sudden, temperature dropped at the same time. Then we caught an EVP, or then we saw something shadowy across the wall, or then our cameras went dead, their batteries went dead suddenly. Like now you have 3 pieces of data that you can say, okay, something happened. We don't know what it is yet, but we know something happened. So the basics are just do that, get a baseline, and then you can sit back. Like the bread and butter, the fun stuff, that's like the EVPs and the cameras and that, like, yeah, I mean, people could use their phone if they're just doing it for fun. Use your phone. There's more likely you're going to get interference and it's not going to be as quote unquote bulletproof as evidence. But you know, if you're just getting started, like just record on voice memo and see if you hear any voices back, or use your camera. And I don't believe in orbs, but sometimes you'll catch shadowy figures or you'll catch something really interesting, luminous and interesting that shouldn't be there, or a person that may not supposed to be there. So use what you have. If you want to get into higher end stuff, the stuff that I found most effective, you'll see a lot of IR cameras, infrared cameras out there, but I think full spectrum cameras, I've had a lot of great success with cases using those, and higher end audio recording devices. So like for me, I use a Zoom H1 or H4n. Use something as simple as a little Sony hand recorder or dictation device. You know, it doesn't matter, just something that you can record on. And then some of them you can listen live and see if you hear responses live. Sometimes you're going to have to play it back. And I've had a lot more success with recording in short bursts, asking questions, and then immediately stopping the recording and then playing it back live while we're there to try to like see what's going on. And that technique was really kind of coined by the Constantinos, Mark and Debbie, who I was friends with. They did a lot of their EVP sessions like that. And I think it's still a good way to do it because then you're like in the moment, you kind of know like, okay, is something actually talking to us or are we just talking to a wall? Which, not against having conversations with walls, but I'd rather have a conversation with a ghost. So if we're not getting anything, move on to the next room and try again.
One really cool thing that I think I use it in the shop actually to work on cars is on my phone or any phone, iPhone, whatever you have, there's a little tiny camera that can plug in and it's heat camera. It can
Mhm.
see thermal.
Yes.
And that would be something, and I don't think they're super expensive, and you could really scan the location you're at and look for cold spots or figures. I've wanted to do that, but at the same time, I'm like, what do I do when I really see something? Because that kind of freaked me out. There's a shadow standing there. You can't see it unless you use the camera. You're like, who's that?
Yeah, the FLIR makes some really cool add-ons for the phone.
Yeah.
And I think it's like in the $200-300 range. So I will say, like, it's definitely good to have, because one of the things we got benefit out of it from was when you go to locations, if people are getting cold spots that they're reporting on the regular, you literally can look at a wall and see, oh, this was an addition, and here's where there's an old open window that they just plastered over. So that wall may be colder because there's no insulation there.
Yeah.
That explains the cold breezes or the noises that people are hearing of, like whistling or things like that. So I do think thermal imagers are a good tool to have if you can afford it. But again, like for most people, if you're just getting into this, you don't want to spend a bunch of money. A basic digital camera and a basic audio recorder will get you where you need to be, as long as you have your phone too.
Yeah. Something I definitely want to say is, regardless, I mean, it's not from experience. I've not done this before, but from a religious background, when you would go to do an investigation, you should start out, and maybe always do it this way, but start out as observation, not provocation.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, every case I go to, I start with my spiritual beliefs first, because I still believe that even if there's nothing there, I want to be spiritually fortified before going.
Right.
And a lot of my Christian friends, and one of the oldest Christian traditions, by the way, and even going back to original Hebrew traditions, Psalms 90 and 91 as prayers or sort of like preparation prayers for going into these hauntings, like those are huge.
Yeah.
But like, everyone's got their own practice. So whatever your practice is, I would always say treat every situation, every case, or every location as a potential spiritual hazard, so to speak. So just be prepared, not to be scared, just be prepared. Then go in. And like you said, it's about observation. 90% of it is observation. Even when I'm asking questions, I'm not trying to provoke the entities or provoke the ghost, because I may be talking to someone's grandma.
Yeah.
Like I also don't treat it like a robot. How old are you? It's like, dude, they can hear you. If these ghosts have been interacting with the living, trust me, you don't need to talk like that. Just have a conversation. So everything I do is very conversational with them. It's always, hey, how's it going? I'm Tommy. What's your name? Wait for a response.
So you probably shouldn't put on a black shirt and go in there and say, come and get me, come out of the ground and show me your power. You shouldn't do that.
I'm not a fan of that. And as you told that story of the guy who did that in I believe it was in the Satan episode.
Yeah.
I mean, based on that story and based on my experiences, I think that's a poor decision, but I can't impact other people's free will. So do what you want. I just don't think it's a good idea.
No, I don't. It'd be a terrible idea, I would think.
Yeah, not ideal.
So those are some of the basic tools, some of the things you can take with you. And you probably plan to be up most of the night, correct?
Yeah, but my friend John Zaffis, who is considered the godfather of the paranormal, he's Ed and Lorraine Warren's nephew. So his history is deep in the paranormal and demonology. And one of the things he always said to me is, why the hell you going at night, Tommy? Stuff happens all the time. So that was a really bad John Zaffis impersonation. John, if you're watching, I'm so sorry about that, buddy. But yeah, so
it's true. Yeah.
He would say, like, just, whenever the activity is happening, that's when you go. And I agree with that. The reason I think a lot of people have stuff happen at night is just because we tend to be quieter at night. We tend to be in our homes or in these locations, and there's less hustle and bustle to distract us from just subtle activity. So I think that's probably why a lot of stuff is said to happen at night. But I mean, I've had cases where it's just as off the hook during the day as it is at night.
Yeah. And I could think that would be something people go at night as well, is because maybe they have a day job or they have a busy weekend. And this is some time they actually have uninterrupted. No one's calling them. No one's bothering them. They can focus for 6 or 8 solid hours. Just observing and getting the data and not have, I got a phone call coming. I got to get this call. It's a business call, or,
first rule when we get on site is everybody's phones go on airplane mode.
Yeah. You can't be taking calls and interrupting the data stream.
No. Plus, like, half of the time cell phones will set off EMF or K2 meters or whatever other devices you have registering radio and electromagnetic frequencies. So it's really a bad idea to keep the phone on anyway, just for that. Plus, it can provide other types of interference with some of the other devices. So we just, airplane mode or turn them off completely. If you don't need your phone for the investigation, just shut it off.
And one thing that you've told me, I think, is for someone who's just getting into the investigating field, not to get discouraged, because you've mentioned you might go on 3 or 4 investigations and hear or find nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very common actually. It's I always tell people the job is staring at a blank wall for 6 hours straight. There's usually not a whole lot going on, and it's a lot of times people have other stuff happening that is what they perceive as activity of the paranormal is actually a very logical, physical, real world explanation. So I don't believe in telling people, oh, you're completely wrong, you're crazy. Like, that's not helpful either. But what we can do is go in and say, I hear what you're saying. We will do our best. And then after your 6 to 8 hour investigation, say, these are our findings based on what we've experienced here. We had nothing happen, or we heard this, but we determined that you do have rats in your attic, or XYZ, and we eventually will do like a whole report and send that in. The unfortunate part is it's a unpaid job. So if you're doing it right, unfortunately, there are people that charge for it. And I think that's absolute BS, but that's just my personal
Oh,
opinion.
wow. There's people that charge money for it?
Oh, yeah. Look, I understand that people want to get paid for their time, but when you can't even prove this exists at all, like, how the hell are you going to go charge somebody money for it? And plus, these people are already scared. They're already like a little worried about what's going on in their house. And the last thing they need is someone taking advantage of that and charging them money again for something you can't prove or disprove. So I say you never get charged for it. You never take money for it. And you do this because it's something that's fascinating to you and you want to help people out. So it does help people out if you're doing residentials to just give them peace of mind sometimes and say, yeah, we didn't find anything. But that's okay, because that means it's probably not haunted. And if you need to come back, well, we'll come back one more time. But if we don't find anything then, yeah, it's probably not haunted. There are attention seekers out there. There's going to be people that say, oh, well, it's definitely haunted. Like, you're wrong. And that's fine. And maybe the activity just wasn't being the trained circus bear for you that night. But if people want the attention and they want to believe something's haunted, that's up to them.
I would say the first thing you should keep in mind if you're just getting started is you should probably spend the first 3 or 4 investigations collecting data, learning how it works. Maybe you get some data, you actually find some evidence or things, and kind of get a feel for how things go. You probably shouldn't start out with someone calling you because there's a haunting and they want you to take care of it, because you don't have any experience. You don't know what you're dealing with. You should probably start out slow and go to like a place that's possibly haunted or a known historic site or something, and just start practicing. Start seeing, okay, I got some evidence on my sound recorder. What do I do with that? Maybe I need to talk to some people. There's some words that were spoken that maybe have been someone from the past, or
Yeah.
and learn how it works before you dive into somebody's household. And like you said, don't start out with residentials.
Yeah. I mean, the historic sites are great too, because usually there's a lot of historical data already accumulated by somebody. So if you go in knowing that there's history, you might be able to be more pointed with your questioning. You may be able to be more pointed with where you focus your investigation. You may be able to obtain interesting data from history after your investigation that maybe cross references some sort of electronic voice phenomenon that you captured, or some sort of entity that you encountered. And that's what's cool, is like having that historical record allows you to look back and say, oh, okay, there's this stuff going on. How does that correlate to what we captured? So that's always a great place to start. And I know that some of these historic locations absolutely love having paranormal investigators come in because it's fun for them.
Yeah, it definitely would be fun. I look forward to doing one with you at some point. But what is your advice? So you got a bunch of data on a sound recorder. Maybe you've got something visual data. Is there some sort of way that you advise to start storing this data on like hard drives? It's going to start collecting over time.
Oh, don't I know it? My partner, Dave Harvey, and I have oodles of hard drive space that are filled with stuff that will never see the light of day. So, I mean, it just depends on what you're capturing. Some people really like to put it out there and be like, hey, here's the stuff I'm capturing and here's how I'm doing it. Like, there's a lot of folks that do the open source investigation techniques kind of thing where they talk about what they captured, how they captured it, and put it out to the community so other people can mimic it or try those approaches and then share their results.
Hmm.
And, but like for me in the demonic cases, like I just can't share that evidence because I don't want to spread the demonic forces reach
Right.
out there. Right. So
Hmm.
all that stuff just lives on a hard drive that is not plugged in. So if you're going to do this, I'd say at the least back it up on some sort of external hard drive that's not constantly plugged in. At the best, there are solid state hard drives that would probably be the best option. So there's no moving parts so that you can have this stuff for years to come and be able to reference it whenever. There are still people that like to shoot on retro cameras and old high 8 tapes
Hmm.
because they feel like it gives them better evidence. So if that's the case, then you got to have a dry, dark, cool place to store your tapes so that they don't degrade. Otherwise, you got to get a system like an Elgato or something that you can capture it onto digital, and then doesn't matter if the tapes disintegrate or not. So that's
Okay.
the basics of storing your stuff. But, it doesn't hurt if you want to make a website and you're just doing human haunts or historic locations, build a website, put it all up there and, share what you're doing with people so that, maybe something you're doing is something that most of us old timers haven't thought. I hate to think I'm an old timer. My God, I'm 42, but I've been doing this for a while. But it might be something that those of us old timers never thought about doing. And we
Yeah.
can always learn and innovate the craft of what we're doing. I mean, by and large, paranormal investigating of spirits and ghosts has nearly been the same, at least since the 60s, 70s.
Hmm.
So it hasn't changed a whole lot. Just some new tools like using your Tesla or using the PlayStation Connect device, like those sort of new-ish things. But I don't put much credence in those, truthfully. That's just me again, old timer. I'm the guy who likes to put talcum powder down on the ground and see if there's footsteps. Like that's how old school I am.
That's cool. Yeah, that would be interesting to see. So you have an investigator who's gone on 5 or 6 investigations. They've had some luck. They found some evidence. They're starting to store the data, like you mentioned. They're really starting. Things are moving along nicely for them. And they go on a 6th or 7th investigation. What are some advice or things that you have that you'd like to tell that person that if they come across this or that or the other thing, it's time to pack up. It's time to leave. You've crossed a line. This is an area not of your expertise. You shouldn't delve into this. It's time to leave.
That's a great question. And so because of the way that I did my consulting, most of the cases I got on were by proxy. Basically, other teams would go in, run into things like you just mentioned, and say, I think this is beyond the scope of what we can handle. So we'd like to bring you in because we know this is what you do.
Hmm.
So most of those things are if there's physical harm happening to your clients
Okay.
or to people on the location, that's a big red flag. If
Hmm.
objects that are 25 to 50 pounds or heavier are being moved, that's another indication you need to leave. If and this has happened actually on cases for me, if like you have somebody who's a psychic or a sensitive person and they become overwhelmed by the energies there, sometimes partial possession can happen. Sometimes they will just drop and go comatose momentarily, and it's terrifying
Wow.
in the moment. So these are things that you should definitely consider as red flags. Like, do we really need to be here doing this? Probably not. As soon as you're scared, then you become food for things.
Hmm.
So I always say, like, just if you can keep your composure through it all, then it's okay. But if you can't, there's no judgment, but you need to extricate yourself from the situation. And I always tell people, like, our first line of defense is ourselves. It's our body telling us something's wrong. So getting headaches, or the most common is feeling your digestional tract, your gut gets uncomfortable, gets queasy, feels like there's pressure on it. That's a big indicator that you probably need to head out.
Yeah, there's definitely some areas that you could get into where you might start experiencing these things. Some people, like you said, would get fearful and they would know it's time to leave. But for others, it might be encouragement to go deeper than they really should. They're like, "Oh, we're onto something here. We need to get this get the cameras rolling. This could get really good." And that's probably a bad idea. Would you agree with that?
If you're not prepared for it.
Yeah.
I think for some people, like, so when you're dealing with demonic cases, it's different because you're trying to break pretense with these entities, and
Hmm.
that requires pushing some of those boundaries of comfort. But the only people I'd have on those cases are the team members I know that can handle it
Hmm.
versus just going out on a ghost hunt with people that, would be afraid if Casper came up and said, hey, behind them. So I always say don't pressure people to do what they're not comfortable doing, because that's a recipe for disaster. That's also how attachments can happen. People will call them hitchhikers. That's another term for them. But like that sort of effect honestly happens with the UFO phenomenon as well, but mostly with ghosts and the non-human malevolent stuff. It's a pretty common thing. So I just say, like, go where you're comfortable. As soon as you're not comfortable, get out. And if you feel like you got to push the envelope because you've got some sort of thrill seeking adrenaline junkie side of you, just don't do it alone, because anything can happen. Like, you could just trip and fall, or like we had one of the paranormal teams I worked with, they had somebody investigating the attic and she fell through the attic floor because it
Oh
was
my.
flooded. So like stuff can happen that's just normal stuff. So don't go alone. Always have somebody with you. But if the majority of your team is like feeling the vibe to get out, then it's best to just wrap it up and get out of there, and then come back with people that are more prepared for that kind of vibration or energy.
Yeah, definitely. And what would you say to someone who, some of the signs of demonic, where they smell sulfur, they hear growling, there's some different thing, maybe they start getting scratches on them. It's
Yeah,
definitely, like you mentioned, it's time to get out of there. It's not time to provoke further. It's time to, for safety reasons, it's time to leave.
exactly. If you don't know what you're dealing with, and by demons too, like there's all types of entities out there from my beliefs and from what I've done.
Hmm.
So you may not even be running into a demon. So the first thing some people will do is start throwing holy water around, or they'll start praying, but like it may not have any impact, or it may have the opposite impact, and cause the activity to get progressively worse in a very quick and accelerated manner. So I just think it's better, again, just pull yourself out of those situations
Yeah.
very calmly. Don't go running out of someone's house yelling, "Oh, you got a demon!" Again, had to deal with the aftermath of some of those. Don't do that, because it scares the heck out of the client. And just pull yourself out very calmly, and do whatever cleansing rituals or prayers you do after you leave that location before you get in your car to go home. I always suggest, if you are a Christian or a Catholic, recite several prayers. If you're more paganistic, then some sort of smudging or cedar, or some sort of incense burn to clear yourself out. Or for occultists, if you're a hermetic occultist or follow thelema, then do the LBRP, lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. Like, there are all these things you can do to spiritually cleanse yourself afterwards, so that you ensure you don't take something home with you. Because
Right.
again, if you look like a Tropicana box, it's going to want to stick the straw on you. So you don't want to be the guy that gets the straw stuck in you.
No, you definitely don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah. I don't think they put those straws on the Tropicana boxes. I guess it could have said Capri Sun.
Yeah, it's
Again,
Capri
dating
Suns.
myself.
Yeah, the
Capri
little
Sun. Yeah.
pouches.
You become a Capri Sun pouch, and you
Yeah.
don't want to be that.
No, you definitely don't want to do that. So those are some of the tools you should use, some of the ways you can get some evidence, and also some things you probably, when it's time to leave, you get some of those signs. You probably shouldn't stick around. I have a question for you, though. Even you being a professional, and even some of your friends who are, I guess you could call higher up in this realm, have you guys ever been on a case where even you guys said it's time to leave?
Yeah, I've actually had a couple cases. In fact, one of the cases was because the person was suffering from mental illness issues,
Hmm.
which again, there's a lot of overlap in terms of how we deal with it. So I would oftentimes consult with therapists, licensed therapists, or psychologists, and talk to them about some of the stuff we have going on. And a couple times I was very fortunate and had the therapist come out with us, and they were able to kind of do in the field assessments to let us know, like, no, this person's totally sane and fine, or this person may have issues, they should get it looked at. So there was one case with a veteran who had a very terrible incident happen to him that created a lot of trauma while he served, and it seems to have propagated in him sort of feeling manifestations that weren't happening. So that case was really hard, because it was a lot of time spent trying to engage the individual to seek mental health professionals, and we were giving lots of references and trying to get that person in for help, the help that they actually needed. But at one point during one of the investigations, several of my investigators felt like their lives were at risk in the space with this person, and
Hmm.
so we had to calmly get them out. And I had to sort of play the in between of, like, okay, I'll basically be the blockade between you and this person. You guys calmly say you're leaving, and then I'll just let that person know that we're wrapping up and we leave, and was able to de-escalate the situation, which was good. So yeah, there's sometimes a need for that. And that's why, again, the residential cases, there's a lot of liability stuff. So you have to be very cognizant of that and very careful. There was also another case where it was a possession case that I realized far too late that I had been in over my head. and
Mm,
it was beyond what I should have been handling at the time. And it's not that I couldn't help the person, but there were other things going on behind the scenes with this person and their entity that made it almost impossible for this to be separated, and
yeah.
didn't know that ahead of time. And so it dragged out. It was very depleting on me and some of my team members, and terrifying to another one of my team members who, first time we ever saw somebody's eyes turn like full yellow, not, not just jaundice, but like the irises yellow.
Wow.
That was an entertaining sideshow.
That's freaky.
Yeah, and again, I had seen some stuff. I was going to swear there, so I have to remember we're a PG channel. I've seen some stuff out there, but like every time you catch the first time something happens to you, it's like, oh, well, that's different. Cause like I've seen people's eyes go completely black, but then to see the yellow was, yeah, it was a moment. It was a big moment.
I have a couple more questions for you before we go. Another one, I've seen this on shows I've watched on TV, is that you see people using equipment and all of a sudden their batteries will drain. Like
Yeah.
multiple equipment throughout the house, they'll all drain all together at the same time. Is there a risk, someone who's invested a little bit of money to get started with equipment, have you ever seen cameras or sound recording equipment be fully damaged and rendered inoperable by entities?
Only a couple times. Most of the time, things will work again, and it's just the battery that gets drained very quickly. Not entirely sure of the science of how that works, but most of the time, it just taps the battery out, and then you just got to throw a new one in, and then you recharge that battery, and it's fine. Or actually, we've had a couple times where the battery showed to be drained, the camera stopped working, or the audio recorder stopped working, and then we go to recharge the battery, and it says it's full. So
That's weird. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's an availability for them to manipulate the equipment, but the chances of them breaking it outright, I don't really see that often. I think it's more likely if you're in a case where something is more like a poltergeist or has more ability to throw things around. That's likely what's going to break your stuff. Like if it pushes the investigator into a dresser and then they fall on their recorder or something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I could see that.
Yeah.
So that definitely answers a lot of questions for me. I definitely had some myself. I'd like to get started into doing some of those things. That gives you some ideas of equipment that you can use to get started with. It's not super expensive. It gives you some methods to use, data storage, and ways to go about doing your investigation, where you should do the investigations starting out, and also some tips when things go awry or things go wrong, or some things you shouldn't do when you're a new investigator. So that's definitely some great information. But I'm curious, Tommy, I've asked you some questions, and I'm curious if the viewers have any questions.
The viewers always have questions, sir.
Good.
And the first one is from William Baldwin 9346, the lesser known Baldwin brother, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
He asks us, why is it always older places, houses, churches, etc.? Where are the haunted Walmarts, Kmart, dead malls? Yes, some old theaters, even some retail stores are several decades old. So I can say this, like I've had just as many new developments and new buildings as I have historic places that have had
Mm-hmm.
activity. It doesn't necessarily mean that the place itself was haunted, but what was on the property before it may have
Right.
been the source of the haunting, or someone may have gone into the location and done something they shouldn't have done, which then caused the haunting. So for me, in my experience, it's not just the old stuff. There's just as much new stuff that has stuff going on. So that's my answer to the question. Although a haunted Walmart, I guarantee if you search YouTube for that, there's a video out there of some stuff falling off shelves in a Walmart somewhere.
All right. What's next, Tommy?
Next question. We're going to go with SFB Friend asks Wizard. That's you, Wizard. I am a Christian. I am beginning more and more to believe we are brought here. And I do believe it is hubris to believe that we are the only beings in this vast universe of ours. What do you think? So I take it this revolves around the extraterrestrial talk we had on the UFO and the alien episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe we've brought here, and if we've been brought here, why can't some other beings somewhere else also have been brought there? I believe that. I believe there's beings all over the universe. One thing that's interesting to think about, it talks about in Genesis in the Bible with the story of Cain and Abel. God punishes him, the murderer brother, and puts a kind of an X or something on his forehead and says, I'm sending you to this land of these people. I'm casting you into this land. And my question is, what people? There's supposed to be Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel so far. Where are these other people? Has he brought other people? Are there other entities, other beings? I believe there's more than just us on Earth, and I do believe we were brought here for a reason.
Well, I want to add to that. Another one of our listeners and viewers, Gemmelot, Gemmellot, they actually brought up what is it? It's the Gospel of John, chapter 10, verse 16. And the quote was, I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. So they wanted to know your thoughts on that, and it seems to tie directly to this other question. So what are your thoughts on that?
That could be looked at as different flocks of sheep. Maybe there's a group of beings, us on Earth, maybe on another planet in another galaxy somewhere there's another flock. There's flocks all over the whole universe. But just like I just mentioned, I brought that up, that there was these other groups of people that were living in unison with Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. Where did they come from? Is this a separate flock? Are they a different species of being?
Well, I think we answered those questions for Gemmelot and SFB Friend. The last one is from One True Moose, and it's about poltergeists. Their question: how are these different from a child's imaginary friend?
I'll let you answer that one, Tommy.
You don't want to touch that one?
How is it different than a child's imaginary
You threw
friend?
interdimensional travel at me with no preparation. I'm going to let you take this one first.
I'll take it. Okay. How is a poltergeist different than a child's imaginary friend? Well, we've done actually an episode. There's a link in the description if you want to go see it, about poltergeists. And I actually learned something out of that video from Tommy, that it's not necessarily always a ghost or an entity. It could just be energy. If it's a child's friend, there's probably intelligible conversation or interaction going on. And if it's just a replay from the past, constantly replaying, I don't think there would be intelligible interactions going on with that. So I guess that's my thoughts on it.
Well, I'll add my 2 cents, my 2 pennies here.
Okay.
Given that poltergeists, we know, at least in my expertise, poltergeists are thought form manifestations from living people, then yeah, it's possible that a child with enough, I guess, psychic gusto, let's say, could potentially create a poltergeist out of their imaginary friend.
Right.
But it is also, and I've had this happen on several cases, where the imaginary friend actually is not an imaginary friend, but we could actually look at the history of the location and figure out, oh no, this is a deceased person.
Okay.
And this child is just seeing and talking to them. So
Wow.
I hope that answers that question. Is it just an imaginary friend? It could be. Is it a poltergeist? Could be. Is it a ghost? Could be.
It would need to be investigated.
Hey, and there we go. Now we got to go show up at your place. All right.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, just make sure the coffee's brewing. I love coffee.
Yeah, I would definitely need some. So we definitely enjoyed doing this video for you guys. Hopefully it was helpful for you. You definitely want to hit the subscribe button, because there's many, many more videos coming down the pike. The subscriber count is growing. We want to get our viewer count growing. We can share all of our experiences with each other in the comments. If you have more questions, let us know, and we will definitely get a chance at least to answer them on future videos. Here's some more videos, guys. Can you believe that? That's what
I can't believe we're still doing this. Oh my God. This is great.
Yes. Let's keep it going as long as we can.
Yeah, until we're really old and gray, not just pseudo old and gray.
I'm starting to get gray.
Oh, you got a ways to go. We're getting there.
Okay.
You'll be at Santa soon.
All right. I can't wait. All right. Thanks again, guys.
Bye, everybody.